Rhodesian, a mercenary for hire, a gun runner, and a diamond smuggler.
How about soldier of fortune?
TIA, my brew. This is Archer.
Any Archer? National Geographic.
Hey Admin, aren't you a firearms channel? Why aren't you staying on the flat range doing flat range ninja things? Well, to be fair, I'm a massive nerd. Go figure. And I'm a big fan of cinema. I'm a big fan of good gunplay in cinema, and Blood Diamond is no exception to this rule. A gun in that movie would go on to launch and shape this channel, so I owe a lot in a way to the movie Blood Diamond. It's one of my favorite movies, and this is also my channel where I can do whatever I want.
I do what I want.
There are no rules. So of course today we're gonna break down Danny Archer.
Yeah.
Now to better break down Danny Archer, we have to know his history, the history of those nations, and the conflicts, as well as the conflict that he would find himself in Sierra Leone. Where is Danny Archer from? Well, he was born in Rhodesia.
Cancel!
We say Zimbabwe now, don't we?
Women.
Now, what is Rhodesia? If you live under a rock, or chances are the American education system failed you like it failed me, because Rhodesia in South Africa and Africa as a whole isn't really covered in our Western education system. Typically, the coverage we get from Africa today is usually famine, war, and just general upheaval, and it kind of gets drowned out because it happens so often, which is also sad. Now, to better understand Rhodesia, you have to understand Rhodesia herself. It was a former British colony that gets a lot of people going on the internet on both sides of the aisle. One side will call other side commies, the other side will call the other side fascists, white supremacists, and all the other things. An interesting factoid, though, is that during World War II, many Rhodesians would go off to fight against Nazi Germany herself under the British Protectorate, which I find rather interesting, giving the label of slurs they throw at people that find Rhodesia interesting. To be fair, there were some folks and bad actors in recent American history that would go on and, under the flag of Rhodesia or their Rhodesian interest, commit massive crimes, i.e. an active shooter. Of course, this is a heavy topic that we're kind of, side trailing on, but it does have to be mentioned because chances are I'll be mentioned in my comments. But of course, that's evil action, and I don't think anyone would support that action on either side of the aisle. It's a lot to break down, right? There's a lot of history and context and even internet arguing today. Now, all of that political stuff aside, I still find the conflict rather interesting, mainly from a military history standpoint. You see, the Rhodesian Bush War is another example of the Cold War turning hot, and we get to see a lot of new tactics, technology, and gear being used in an unconventional warfare setting. And it also shows a smaller force, being the Rhodesians, taking on a much larger force and them having many a military campaign victory, but ultimately the country would dissolve and become Zimbabwe in 1980. Another interesting fact about these military campaigns in Rhodesia was their fire force tactics and their airborne drops. You see, the Rhodesians post-World War II were conducting some of the most heavy amount of airborne drops the world has ever seen. There was even instances of guys that were paratroopers during World War II fighting against Nazi Germany that did combat jumps and operations, coming back and then even doing more combat jumps and operations with their fire force tactics. I think one reason in gun culture why the conflict is so interesting is the massive amount of weapons used along with the tactics. Now, one gun would rise to the top in particular, that being the Rhodesian FAL. Now, of course, this is a much more modernized looking version of it, but it does have the infamous baby poop camo that would become synonymous with the Bush War, and the Rhodesians would use this along with a slew of other weapons to fight a very effective anti-guerrilla war campaign. Now, Danny Archer's role in Rhodesia was that he was a young lad, 9 years old, where he witnessed the horrific death of both of his parents.
You lost both your parents.
That's a polite way of putting it.
Arguably, I know it's a fictional story for him, but the general concept is pretty sad.
Boo-hoo, right?
Essentially, he's losing all of his innocence and witnessing a very traumatic act that goes beyond the typical horrors of war, of soldiers fighting. Now you're seeing civilian-level casualties. And Danny Archer is essentially what happens to his parents is witnessing a serial killer-level murder.
Mom was raped and shot, and Dad was decapitated and hung from a hook in the bone.
So you can see where Danny Archer is being formed and the world around him is forming him into who he would become in the future. Now, Danny Archer would eventually go to South Africa. South Africa was undergoing a similar thing to what Rhodesia was going through, where they were fighting essentially communist-backed nations on their borders. Now, this is going to be the Angolan border war. It's a very fascinating conflict, and for the era, I believe it was the second largest war in Africa since World War II. Now, it's a pretty large fight. You have to think there's a lot of mechanized troops, tanks, artillery, jets going into this battle, and it's not really well covered in Western society. Thank you, American education system, yet again. This conflict, we would see a lot of cutting-edge innovation coming out, as well as almost a 30-year conflict. You're going to see a lot of refined fighting tactics, and pound for pound, it was argued that the South Africans had a very effective fighting force. I mean, you got to to think this conflict started in 1966 and would go until 1990. That's longer than the global war on terror, and it's a very long conflict. So that's a lot of time for gear and equipment to get developed. Such gear as, say, the Pattern 83 webbing, which I think is still very relevant today, and it would influence a lot of future pop culture that we would see later down the road with Hollywood. Danny Archer's role in this is that essentially he joins the SADF, and then he gets rolled into the 3-2 Battalion as hinted in the movie.
The 3-2 Battalion.
That's right. You know, contrary to what you might think about us, we fought with the blacks, huh? Yeah? Side by side.
And he'd be fighting under Colonel Coetzee. There's a scene where Danny Archer's at the vineyard and Colonel Coetzee is talking to Danny Archer about how he was a good soldier, but Colonel Coetzee made Danny even better.
You were a good soldier, but I made you better, didn't I?
Yes, sir. Yes, you did.
Now, the 3-2 Battalion was an elite fighting group of the SADF. They were often called by their enemies the Terrible Ones. And the 3-2 Battalion was a unit that was doing high-speed cool guy stuff along with the SADF and doing what usually high-speed cool guys do. There were many roles within that unit, but their origins are rather interesting. You see, during the Angolan, essentially, revolution that they had in 1975, there was a lot of the opposition that would flee from Angola and join the SADF, and essentially they'd get rolled into this unit. And they had to learn Portuguese, and they had to be trained on all different weapons, and eventually the unit would expand and become the battalion that we know it as history today. Danny Archer's role in this, of course, was that he was rolled up into this unit and joined. Now, there's another character in Hollywood that was a member of the 3-2 Battalion that we know of, and that's Kruger from Elysium, which I find rather interesting. I do like characters having fun military backgrounds from obscure nations like South Africa or Rhodesia. I find it just so much more fascinating and fun. I don't know why. I think it's just like the history nerd in me, but I like it. I'm allowed to like it. I can do what I want. The war would go on for Danny Archer. Eventually, the 3-2 Battalion, as part of treaties, would be disbanded and a lot of the soldiers would be rolled into different units. Now, an interesting factoid is that a lot of the members of the 3-2 Battalion would go on and help form Executive Outcomes. Executive Outcomes. I've heard that name before. Now, Executive Outcomes is a private military group, and at the time was one of the best private military groups in the world. They would go on to fight in the Angolan border war, as well as their actions in Sierra Leone. Now you can kind of start to see where I'm trying to get up to the Blood Diamond story arc. Executive Outcomes was founded by Simon Mann and Eben Barlow, and essentially they were taking a lot of former troops that had years and years of combat experience. You gotta think from both Rhodesia and South Africa, you're gonna have a very elite fighting force. Of course, there's always a talk of morality and ethics of mercenary groups, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't care about any of that because mercenaries have been around since the dawn of time. Even one of the guys I look up to, Travis Haley, he was a mercenary for Blackwater.
Jesus Christ, it's like a fucking turkey shit.
The morality and ethics, of course, the woke people will say I'm probably bankrupt on it, but I don't care. I think it's a cool concept. I know I just went on a tangent about mercenaries, but it's just, yet again, it ties back into why I love the movie so much. So, essentially, in this plot line, Danny Archer joins a fictional, not Executive Outcomes, but Executive Outcomes in the movie, at which point he's doing mercenary work, I would assume, to some capacity, or ends up doing more private errands for Colonel Coetzee himself. One of such being gun running, which takes us up to the movie, at least at the very start. Now, at the very start of the movie, we get Danny Archer landing in a plane full of guns, at which point he tells his co-pilot to take off and not land unless he gets the okay. Now, Danny Archer gets confronted by these RUF fighters, at which point he turns over his Glock 26, goes and talks to Commander Zero?
Commander Zero!
He goes and talks to Commander Zero and they do the gun and diamond exchange. So we get the gun running aspect. Now, this is something that kind of confused me when I think about the movie. Why he didn't just fly back away with the diamonds after doing the gun deal. Instead, he has to walk the diamonds in via goat to Liberia. Doesn't make much sense to me.
After I smuggle the stones across the border, local buyers get them to a middleman in Monrovia. He pays off customs and certifies the diamonds were mined in Liberia, where they can be legally exported.
I know there's a reason, and it's crucial to the plot. I know. Like, bear with me, but, you know, come on. Why don't you just fly away with the diamonds? Anyway, so Danny Archer secures the diamond deals. He tries to smuggle the diamonds back across the border, gets hemmed up, goes to prison, at which point he meets Solomon Vandy.
I know your name, Solomon Vandy. You have a name. You have a family. I'm gonna catch them.
Now, Solomon Vandy was a character where his village was raided by the RUF. Now, what is the RUF? The RUF is a Revolutionary United Front that popped up in Sierra Leone during their war. Essentially, Solomon Vandy's village was raided by the RUF, at which point his son was taken away and he was sent to the diamond mines where he discovered the large diamond, at which point that camp was also raided and he was captured, and then probably during the confusion figuring out who was who, he got sent to prison. At which point, once they figure out he was a victim of all this, he gets released and now he's going to start searching for his family. But during all of that, the commander of the RUF that captured him is like, hey, I know you found a massive pink diamond because that guy saw it.
Where is the diamond? Do you see a diamond?
So that's like where we get set up for the movie Blood Diamond, roll credits, right? all that to say, this is where we kind of start getting the plot line and all the history tying into this movie, which of course, is why we're making a video for. One thing about Danny Archer that I enjoy is that he always looks so ruggedly aesthetically pleasing. And if you want to try and look as cool as Danny Archer, then I would encourage you to check out Americana Pipe Dream Apparel, one of the sponsors of this video. Guys, Americana Pipe Dream has been sponsoring this channel for a bit, and they have a bunch of cool stuff on their website. Not only do they have milsurp gear, but they have night vision, knives, manuals, camping equipment, a bunch of cool stuff to keep you stocked, and they are great supporters of this channel, and they will support your milsurp inventory needs. Link for them is going to be in the description down below, and of course, a massive thank you to Americana Pipe Dream Apparel. If you were ever wondering of like how much of a simp is admin for Danny Archer and how much does he like the movie Blood Diamond, I even bought the Breitling Chrono Avenger that Danny Archer wore in the movie. Now this one is a black leather strap. He has a brown leather strap in the movie, but I just had to have it because it's one of my favorite movies. I'm not even a big watch guy, and this was an expensive watch, but I just love the movie so much and I love the character so much that I was like, all right, if I'm gonna get any watch that's high-end watch, because I used to rock the Garmin watches, I want to get a classy Breitling Chrono Avenger, and I did it. It was kind of like a celebratory mark once I crossed 500,000 subs here, so big thank you to you guys for subscribing. If you're not subscribed, then maybe you should consider it. I really appreciate that, but it goes back to me being a massive nerd. Crazy. I was crazy once. Now, Danny Archer would eventually get released from that prison, at which point he starts coming up with a plan of how to get that massive pink diamond. And we learned something rather interesting about him, at least it's a fan theory. And that fan theory is that Danny Archer may have AIDS. Now, the reason for this theory is that after he gets done in his apartment, he's leaving and he's approached by two young girls offering their services in exchange for, of course, as prostitutes do, saying that they are HIV or AIDS free. I can't remember which one, I'm just a big dum-dum.
I'm safe, huh? No HIV.
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
Now, of course, this theory would tie back into the future of this video that we'll get to in a bit. So Danny Archer starts getting his affairs in order, at which point he links up with Solomon Vandy. He's like, hey, I'll help you find your son if you can help me get that massive pink diamond.
Who do you think got you out of jail, huh? That makes us partners.
I am not your partner.
That diamond could be priceless. We split it and you get your family. What's it gonna be, yes or no? Yes or no?
Now, after Danny Archer got arrested, he probably lost his Glock to the police and he needed a new protection, so he goes over to a bartender friend and secures his HK USPC. An HK USPC like this one. Now, the HK USPC being a very finely German crafted handgun, it's hard to imagine how one would sneak its way in being owned by a bartender in Africa, but connections are connections and Danny Archer is very well connected.
So you want something nice, huh?
The best you can get a hold of, all right?
Take me a few days, but I'll go find you something special.
At this scene, this is important because this is where he would meet the journalist Maddy Bowen.
Danny Archer,
Maddy Bowen.
pleased to meet you.
Now, him meeting Maddy Bowen is us getting even more background of Danny Archer. During their exchange, she essentially asks him and accuses him of being a white South African, at which point he lets us know that he's actually Rhodesian.
Says the white South African.
I'm from Rhodesia.
Now, Danny, of course, once learning that Maddy Bowen's a journalist, tells her to piss off, which is probably the best thing you can do to journalists. It's probably the most advised.
Well, off the record, I like to get kissed before I get fucked, huh?
So Danny Archer has to go back to Cape Town, South Africa, and link up with Chrono Coetzee because Chrono Coetzee wants an explanation of why he has no diamonds for the guns that he gave to the RUF. Now, this is where we learn even more about Danny Archer's background and the Colonel's racket that he has in Sierra Leone. You see, the Colonel explains to Danny Archer and to the audience as well that essentially he sells guns to the RUF, and the RUF uses those guns on the government. The government then hires this fictional mercenary group, aka real-life executive outcomes, to go and fight the RUF. In exchange, the government pays them as well as gives them mining right concessions to diamonds. So you can kind of see that there is a massive racket going on that Colonel Coetzee is at the top of, making a bunch of money. It's kind of brilliant. He's selling the bad guys guns, he's then fighting the bad guys that has those guns, he's also getting paid by the guys that he's fighting, and he's getting paid by the guys that he's getting paid to. Wait, hold on. So he's making a bunch of money, which is brilliant. Now, of course, the Colonel gets word of Danny Archer's large diamond, and he even wants in on that. And we get even more background of how Colonel Coetzee formed Danny into being one of his best soldiers. Of course, Danny Archer would return and find Solomon Vandy, and then they would go and start essentially hunting down his lost son / the diamond. And of course, we're kind of fast tracking through the movie because it's more so a movie. Stupid! So of course, we're kind of fast tracking through the movie to getting all the Danny Archer parts because it's mainly a video about Danny Archer. Go figure. Now, Danny Archer and Solomon Vandy would encounter two RUF rebels that are looking after a bridge.
Bring that pink chicken skin over here, huh?
Now, with great technical skill, Danny Archer uses his USP Compact. That's the same thing. It's like saying, Tina, you fat lard. Danny would dispatch them with great efficiency with his USP. And then, of course, using an RUF soldier's own AK, dispatch the last guy. Now, Danny does this rather ruthlessly and without even hesitation. It shows a great technical skill. Danny even ensures that they are dead by pinning them to the deck, making sure that they're not going to get up and shoot him in the back. Clearly, he has experience in this topic. Now, if you want to have some level of skill with a firearm that Danny Archer may have, then you should check out SDI. Get accredited gunsmith training at the very least and know how to work on firearms and take your education to the next level. SDI offers accredited gunsmith training, and in the modern workplace, credits mean that you are much more competitive against the competition. Employers like that kind of stuff because you can sit there and learn things. That means you can sit there and do your job. So big thank you to SDI. Link for them will be in the description down below. So of course, Danny Archer and Solomon Vandy would link back up with Maddy Bowen. At this point, Danny Archer gives even more exposition to Maddy Bowen about how he was Rhodesian, how he's a 3-2 Battalion member, and even talks about how there's no apartheid in the foxhole.
You know, contrary to what you might think about us, we fought with the blacks, huh? Yeah, side by side. There was no apartheid in the foxhole. The colonel always used to tell us that.
That's what the colonel used to say. Danny Archer tells Maddy Bowen that he thought he was fighting communists, but really it was about who gets what. So he says, screw it,
I'm gonna get mine.
and that leads Danny Archer down the life of mercenary work / gun running and diamond smuggling. Of course, he would also spill the beans about the diamond trade to Maddy Bowen at this point, but she kind of hints during this scene about getting intimate. This comes back to bite Danny Archer and why there is a fan theory that he has AIDS, because he can't get intimate with the smoke show that is Maddy Bowen. Now, Danny Archer not being able to get intimate with Maddy Bowen is kind of like, if this theory is correct, it's the sins of his past coming back to haunt him. It could also explain why he wants to get that diamond so much, so it can maybe help with covering his treatment. And it's just a real shame because having a beautiful woman in your life really just adds to your overall existence as a man. Now, of course, Danny Archer and Solomon Vandy would go on to find the diamond can.
You tell him to send in the Dakadak.
Call him the Dakadak, which is another great little Easter egg for like South African culture. I think it's just fun because they're calling it Dakadak like a helicopter. But the Heinz gunship shows up, they start clearing out the camp, and then the fictional mercenary, not executive outcomes groups lands down, and then we get Colonel Coetzee. Now, Colonel Coetzee uses some harsh coercing to reveal where the diamond is at by threatening Solomon Vandy's son. They would go off into the jungle, and they would start digging up where the diamond's at, and then of course they would have their infamous shootout. Danny Archer gets hit during the shootout, but he takes out the colonel and some of his buds.
TIA. Danny.
TIA?
At which point he then picks up his bud's Car-15. A Car-15 of which would forever change the trajectory of my life personally because I just love the gun so much. It's not that Car-15 over there, no. It's actually, that's an airsoft one. It's this one over here. Ah! Now this Car-15, of course, would change the trajectory of my life forever because I love the look and the aesthetic and the vibe of the movie so much. And even though this gun is really in it for just a little bit, I don't know why, I just freaking I wanted to clone it. It's just such a vibe. Acha! You're a dead man! Yeah. Before I was even a YouTuber, I cloned the gun because I just wanted to. When I started making YouTube videos, of course, I wanted to talk about guns in my collection, and that being not really a common gun out there floating about, it really took off with the audience, and it let me start my channel. That would become Administrative Results. Of course, it used to be called Executive Outcomes. Now, the reason I changed the name is, I explained it back in the day, is that I thought the name was really cool. I think it's a really cool name, it still is, but people get really mad about it. It's like, it's controversial, it's whatever. Eben Barlow came back out of retirement and reactivated Executive Outcomes, and I just felt like that would be inappropriate for me to keep the name because technically that's his company. So of course, then we get to Administrative Results. So with Solomon Vandy and son and the diamond and a newfound beautiful Car-15 in tow, Danny Archer leads the gang to where his pickup and rendezvous point is with his pilot. But of course, they get intercepted by the mercenaries along the way, and Danny Archer chooses to hold them off with the Car-15, giving enough time for Solomon Vandy and his son and the diamond to escape.
It's also where we get one of the best lines of the movie. Yeah. Knowing he's a dead man, he holds off in advance while others can get away. And what is a more masculine dream than that? And then of course, Danny Archer has that sad phone call with Maddy Bowen saying, hey, I'm dying, I'm right where I should be, and it's a pretty good emotional scene.
I'm really happy I met you. You know that?
Yeah, I'm really happy I met you too.
It made me feel emotional. Made me tear up a little bit. Anyway, so then we get to the death of Danny Archer. I know technically we don't see him die, and Hollywood has a thing for like, you didn't see him die, is he really dead? But it's like, what are they gonna do, make a Blood Diamond 2? Like, it's not a sequel type movie, buddy. I'm pretty sure he's dead. I think Danny Archer captures the interests of many a men. That kind of sounds sus. Why is that? Well, Danny Archer is a character that has a high level of agency over himself. He's very skilled when it comes to fighting. I think that's something that men find intrinsically valuable because as men, we can't really create life like women can. All that we can do really well is protect ourselves and make money. And we want to be really good at those things. I think there's another reason is that Danny Archer is showing that his own self-interest and eventually foregoing that, but he has a good grasp on reality. I mean, I think of his interest of getting the diamond, like he's gonna get what's his and get off the continent. He's risking a lot, potentially his own life, and in the end he does risk his life and lose it for a diamond. But that payout would have been massive. I mean, you think about your normal job every day, you get in your car, you go to your job, you drive, you brave traffic, even though relatively speaking it's all pretty safe, but there's a chance you could die, all for a 9-to-5 paycheck. But what if you could chance it all and make a bunch of money, potentially never have to work again for a diamond? Or, I mean, you think about guys that have gone to war in the modern era, like the global war on terror, and those guys come back, what do they have to gain in coming back besides just a shitty VA experience? Do they get to bring back cool war trophies? If they did, they weren't allowed to even. It's not like you were a Roman legionary, after your service you get a sick plot of land in a foreign province. It's just, war is kind of a racket and there's not much to gain on it. Danny Archer, even in the movie, talks about this, and he learns like, hey, what did I get from this war besides losing friends? I think that's another reason why the character resonates with me, is that as a young man, I was willing to risk my life and limb for government agencies, and or I'm sure some of you guys were as well, but then you realize, what would that get me in the end? Maybe a decent pension at best, if you retire with it, but what's that pension gonna be worth in 20 to 30 years? And you maybe think like, okay, could I escape all this if I risk it, gamble it big, and get some sort of like diamond, you know? I believe that's another reason why the character resonates with me so much. But ultimately, I love the movie very much, as well as I'm a big fan of the Danny Archer character. Him being a flawed man, yet a very capable one, and dying to himself in the end to save others, which is a noble cause. The ultimate noble cause, I should say, is selfless sacrifice. Gentlemen, of course, this was a weird little niche topic diving into a fictional character from a movie that I love very much. I know it's not the usual program, but it's something that I think is really fun, and I, of course, love movies, I love firearms, and chances are you do too. If you have an idea for another such niche topic that you would like to see me cover, let me know in the comment section down below. I really appreciate that. I have nothing else for you, gentlemen. As always, I'll catch you on the flip. Patreon. Gentlemen, if you enjoy this type of content, I would encourage you to patron the arts that you would like to see. Patreon is an excellent way to support this channel as it gets monetary value. I give you guys stuff such as early access to videos. There's a Discord where you can stay up late and talk to girls. On occasion, there are giveaways, and it's overall a good time, as well as merchandise. Merchandise helps out a lot. You get some swag, let your mom know you're on the admin train and you're on track to finding a girl to make her your wife and eventually have a bunch of babies, which is mega based. Okay, now the video is actually like really over. Colton's gonna play the bloopers. Wow!
Gentlemen, today we're talking about South Africa.
Now at this time, oh my God, Colton. Ooh, that was about to be bad. Danny Archer's Chrono. Now, of course, oh, the light's falling. Has my light been falling this entire time when I'm talking? Dang it, dude.